Well, good. Well, Pam, thank you so much for visiting with me. This is awesome. Welcome, everybody, to the Ostomy Guy podcast. I'm your host, Austin. As usual, we're visiting today with Pam Wall. Pam Wall, who is much more well known in the sailing community than anything because of everything she's done in regards to the sailing world. But she has also made a huge impact in the ostomy world, and she's a speaker. She has done all kinds of advocacy work, her and her sisters as well. And so I'm looking forward to kind of hearing a little bit about Pam's story, sharing it with you, and maybe we can all learn a little something. She's had an ostomy a little bit longer than I have, and I always love learning from the wisdom of the experience, because I'm a tag along with my parents, Pam. So I'm a mama's boy, and I also work with my dad. And so I am a sponge from people of experience. I just naturally love to watch how they do things, because we are all humans. We all tend to want to find solutions to our personal problems, and the way we do that is a little different based on circumstances. So I'm looking forward to our visit. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
I'm so glad to be here. If I can tell my story and assist anybody in any way, small amount, to me, that's what it's all about, is sharing good information and things that I have done personally myself that worked for me. I'm not saying they're right or they're wrong. I'm just saying they work for me. They might help you out. That's all.
Yeah. Well, tell me I'd like to ask just a very simple question of what's a normal day like for you? And the reason I ask this question, Pam, is because it's super important. People on the front end of getting ostomy surgery, depending on where they are, it can be a very scary thing. And I like to immediately come out and just talk about what your life is like today and what you normally do from a health, hobbies, and habit standpoint. How do you spend a day? Do you still go sailing? Are you healthy, or what's a normal day like for Pam?
Well, the main thing is that I'm alive.
Yeah.
And without that ostomy, I never would be sitting here and being able to talk to you about it.
Same here.
I'm a senior citizen. I'm not going to tell anybody how old I am, because that's my prerogative. Okay. But today I live in Fort Lauderdale, where I chose to live after living in Chicago all my youth, and then graduating from the University of Wisconsin. And the day after I graduated from Wisconsin, I said, I never want to see snow or ice again. And so I got in my car and I drove down to Fort Lauderdale, and I've been very fortunate. I found a cute little house that was very inexpensive on a canal, a deep water canal right near the entrance to the Atlantic Ocean. And never did I dream that would be very influential in my future life, because I was able to snag my husband with that dock. Yeah. Not me, but my dock, because he had a boat, and that's how I met him. But anyway, so today I live in that very same house. And after having done many, many years of sailing alone with my husband, and then later when we had children with our two children, I don't know if you want me to give my history. But
I
have my honeymoon, for those who are interested. We're on a 30-foot boat. Think of a room in your house, or two rooms in your house that are 30 feet long. No bathroom, just a bucket for a toilet, a one-burner kerosene stove, and a tiny little wooden sloop that my husband had built in Australia and sailed all the way across the Pacific, down around Cape Horn, around South America. And I met him. I was fortunate enough to stumble across him here in Fort Lauderdale. Anyway, our honeymoon was in that little tiny boat. And that's, even though I had always sailed with my father on his boat, he was a race boat, a big race boat person, and he always had crew aboard. So my job on the boat was to pass up the bologna sandwiches and the cold beer as a young kid. So I never really learned about sailing proficiently, but with this young man, Andy Wall, who I chose, and thank goodness later he chose to live with me for the rest of his life, I really learned the fine art of sailing, which is so empowering for a woman.
Yeah.
because it really has been in the past a man's sport. And women aren't considered knowledgeable in it. But Andy wanted me to always be a co-captain with him. He taught me everything, and he was wonderful about it. So when we got married, it was natural that our honeymoon would be crossing the Atlantic in this tiny little boat. Oh, and by the way, for your people who are listening, and for you as well,
Yeah.
Andy's big joke was, because I'm only 4'11", his big joke was that the only reason he married me was because I was the only one who could stand up straight in his boat. So it had 5 feet of headroom, and he was 6'3".
Yeah.
So when he came down below in this boat, he had to, be all squinched up. Anyway, so by the
Did
time
you have your ostomy when you guys were traveling, when you were sailing around the world?
No.
You just had your stomach problems.
I always had my stomach problems, but they were kind of, when I was a teenager is when I had the real problems with them. And it kind of, how ulcerative colitis is, it comes and it goes, and
right.
you have times when you're okay. And sometimes I think a lot of that has to do with what you're doing so that you can continue to do it. I mean, I always had problems, but nothing that stopped me from doing the sailing in this tiny little boat. So we sailed around Europe for 2 years with no engine in the boat, by the way, always sailing.
Wow.
We knew we wanted to have children, so we sailed back home again and sold that little boat and began building a bigger boat, because that boat would have sunk, with another potato chip aboard. It was so tiny. So Andy and I began building another boat together from scratch. And of course, during that period, we both had jobs. We both worked. We both worked on the boat on weekends. And of course, we had 2 beautiful young little children, a little girl, and then 3 years later, a little boy. And I hope that the people who are listening understands this. I was always told by doctors that I would never be able to have children because of my ulcerative colitis. So
wow,
it didn't stop us from trying to have children, of course.
Yeah.
And it was our blessing that we had 2 gorgeous children, and with no complications. I had to have C-sections, not because of the ulcerative colitis, but because of my size. Okay.
Yeah.
So
did the doctor's news on that to you, did that affect you in any way negatively, or were you just always kind of, it is what it is, still optimistic? I'm not certain yet.
I was so young when they told me that. I was 16 or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
And I mean, I didn't get my period till I was 20. Can you believe that? And
holy cow!
It all had to do with everything tied in the ulcerative colitis. And
right.
Well, I did tell you earlier that I had a ruptured appendix, and I had that surgical and things like that. I mean, ruptured. It wasn't just an appendicitis.
Yeah.
So all that contributed to that. And I think when you're really young, until you find someone in your life that you are going to share with for the rest of your life, you don't really think of children. And I told Andy I wasn't going to be able to have children. And he was such a vagabond at that time. He said, hey, it's okay with me.
Whatever, right.
Whatever. So, I think a lot of it is mental. And when you start realizing it doesn't matter, that's when things happen.
Yeah, that's right.
When you're relaxed about it and stuff like that. And so anyway.
I have so many friends who have struggled through trying to conceive a child when they just either give up and they're just like, and they get back into their life and they're relaxed and they're no longer stressing, they'll conceive then, or at some other point when the stress is gone for them, worrying about it, that once all the tension's gone, it allows things to just work.
Oh yeah. Well, I always joke, if you want to hear a cute aside about getting pregnant. Of course, I thought I was barren, and of course we had Andy tested and he was fine, so it had to be me, right? Anyway, but then you start, okay, that's the way it is, big deal. We're just gonna
Right.
We have each other, and that's all that matters.
That's
Well,
right.
Andy's mother, who still lived in Australia, always was upset with me, the little American Yankee, stole her son from ever going back to Australia, which isn't true because we would go visit, but and she finally decided to come and visit us. And it was a nightmare of tension for me. I mean, and poor Andy, he was in the middle, and
Yeah.
I still was the horrible woman who kept her husband her son from living in Australia. I have never been under such stress in my life as when Andy's mother was here. And that's when I got pregnant.
That's funny. That's pretty good.
But it was a different kind of stress.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
off the cuff, different stress. Anyway,
Oh yeah.
just to go on with what happened with me. So we sailed back home. We had these two wonderful kids. We started building this beautiful boat. When my daughter was 7 and my son was 4, we took off to sail around the world. And we knew we'd be gone a long time. We told my mom we'd be gone for 2 years because I didn't want to worry her, but
Yeah.
We were gone for 7 years. And by the time we got to New Zealand, which is about halfway around the world, so 4 years into our circumnavigation, 3.5 years, okay. It was quite obvious that something was wrong with me, but it was just low-grade fever, minor incontinence, stool-wise,
Yeah.
a bloated belly. I mean, I was embarrassed to wear my bikini bathing suit, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And of course, terrible fatigue. Okay. But, you have to feed your family. You have to sail the boat.
Right.
You have to be cheerful. You can't feel sorry for yourself. There's no time to.
Yeah.
But when we got to New Zealand, it started getting much, much worse. And it was my husband, Andy, who said, we've got to go to a doctor. And we went to a doctor who we were told was a good doctor. And after I described my symptoms, and he gave me a very brief physical exam, he asked me to leave the room. And he had Andy in there by himself. And I thought, oh, this is going to be really bad news.
Yeah.
Andy, 5 minutes after he's in there by himself, comes out, slams the door, grabs my arm and says, we're flying home. He said, that doctor had the nerve to say to me, you're a hypochondriac.
A hypochondriac. Uh-huh.
But he said, she should take Metamucil and it'll all go away. Metamucil would have killed me.
Yeah, a little Metamucil do you some good.
He said, take Metamucil, she'll be over it. So we got flights back home right away. I mean, Andy was really concerned about me. And I came home, I went to my local doctor and he said, Pam, you can get a second opinion, but he said, you can get a second opinion, but you need to see a surgeon today. You just recover. I'll tell everybody what happened, okay?
Okay.
And Andy and I had such confidence in him, and my low-grade fever was getting higher every day. Instead of being 98.9, it was, 99.7 and stuff like that every day, all day. So we went to a very well-known, wonderful surgeon, and he had me in the hospital the next day and said, Pam, I'm going to go in there, but I think you're going to need an ostomy. And I just want your permission if you do. And because of the history of my grandfather that I told you about,
Yeah.
having one.
Do you mind sharing that here after you're done with this part of the story?
No, I'd be glad to.
Okay.
I knew what an ostomy was, at least. I didn't know any of the repercussions of it, but I knew what it was, and I knew that my grandfather lived with it and nobody knew about it. You know what I mean? He never spoke about it. He never did anything.
Yeah.
But I knew that he had one. And for my grandfather to have one, he was one of the first people to have one. And of course, he had all kinds of problems. He had getting bags that would stick. But anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So the long and short of it is I had a full ostomy. The rectum was removed. All my lower intestine was removed. And they found that it was cancerous.
Oh, wow.
So stage 4 cancer. So there was a couple of years before I could feel confident that they got it all. You know, they said they got it all, you know.
Which is
They said
amazing in
it
and
could
of
have
itself.
They said it could have migrated to any organ, you know. We don't recommend chemo and stuff like that. Your recoveries are going to be slow, but you're going to be fine afterwards. So I was alive, and I, you know, even though I was recovering, I still felt a heck of a lot better.
Yeah.
You know, but my biggest concern at that point was not the recovery, but being able to live on a tiny boat.
Yeah.
That has no hot water, no running water, no bathtub, no shower. If you wanted water from the tanks, you had to pump it with your foot. And it was, if you were in a cold climate like New Zealand, like we were going to go back to, that water was freezing cold in the winter. And how I was going to get the equipment that I needed, you know, the pouches and the wafers and everything.
Yeah.
In New Zealand. So my big challenge wasn't the recovery as much as how was I going to proceed on a tiny boat?
Yeah, maintaining and sustaining your lifestyle.
Yeah. Now, if you all think about what a bathroom looks like on an airplane,
Yeah.
well, my bathroom was half that size. It had a toilet.
Which is small for even someone who's 4'11".
It had a tiny little sink with a foot pump. And of course, to flush the toilet, you had to go 35 times, you know, pumping water from the sea. And of course, I, of course, packed bags and bags full of product to take back with us.
Yeah, how did you figure that out? How did you navigate, okay, I need this much, and you always want more than enough. I mean, you're a sailor, so you know you need more.
Yeah,
you always
especially if
prepare.
you're going from port to port, and you know, you didn't know what you could get in the next port.
Yeah.
But what I had was fantastic family backup. And what I would do, of course, when I left the States, I took just a lot of things, because in those early days, I was changing a lot more than I do now.
Yeah.
I changed my bag maybe every 2 weeks.
Now?
No, it lasts for 2 weeks.
Wow.
It's an opening bag, so I, you know, empty it and everything. And
Sure.
I had to go through different wafers to see what stuck the best and didn't hurt, and you know, stuff like that. So I went through a lot. But I'm sorry, what are the nurses called with
the WOCNs?
Yeah, the WOCNs that we had here were just absolutely wonderful. I mean, I lucked into having great people.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. So I took a lot back with me, but then I was always worried, like the next place we were going after that was Fiji.
Yeah.
Where are you going to get that Fiji? You know, so my family would send it to Fiji before we left.
Oh, okay.
So it was waiting for us.
Yeah.
Okay. And then from Fiji, we went to New Caledonia, which was French. But I had enough to get through from New Caledonia to Australia, which was the next place. And then when I got to Australia, I got in touch with the local Ostomy Association there. And funny enough, they didn't have the same product I had.
Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they were able to help me get it through their other resources.
Oh, cool.
So we lived,
wow.
You know, we lived for a year in New Zealand. The same thing happened in New Zealand. Actually, I'm sorry, we went to New Zealand first, and then we went up to Australia. So this all came to a head when we were in New Zealand. So one of our biggest problems was leaving our boat there, because unattended, and you know, you only have a certain number of months cruising permit and everything, and you meet the right people,
yeah,
and they make it happen. But so we were gone 8 months. We came home.
Wow.
And we had to live with my parents because I had rented this house, so I couldn't come into my own house. But I recovered very quickly, because you know why? Because I wanted to recover quickly. Not going to beat me. This was going to renew my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
because I wanted to be there for my children and my husband and the lifestyle that I loved.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to sit back and let myself feel sorry for myself or not be able to handle it.
Yeah.
Now,
How is the how is the ocean environment, all the moisture, how was that on, I mean, you were telling, how often were you changing your system then, and how was
well,
it?
in the beginning, don't forget, when I first got back to New Zealand and we went up to Fiji, where it was, and New Caledonia, where it's tropical, we're in the water. We're huge. My kids are scuba divers with their dad, even though they were young kids.
Yeah.
I'm a chicken. I don't scuba dive. I only snorkel. So I was in the water with my family more than we were out of the water. That is the beauty of cruising in the tropics, you know.
Yeah.
And it did mean that I had to change more often. There's no question about it. But it had, the thing that I would have been worried about if I had been a scuba diver was diving deep, and of course the air that would have been in the
Oh,
pouch.
yeah. Yeah.
But because I'm not a scuba diver, I didn't worry about that. But my husband and kids, who of course had to rent their scuba equipment because we had no room on the boat for it.
Uh-huh.
All the places that we went that knew ostomates who were scuba divers said, you know, that's not a problem. You know, it does occur, but you've got to figure out, just like you do on land, how to handle it at 20 meters down.
Yeah.
You know
Right.
what I mean? 20 meters down. So for scuba divers, it's not a problem at all. Not a problem at all. Now, I never had
That's
to
cool to know.
work through that, because I mean, the deepest I would dive is 20 feet because I had to breathe. You know, I didn't
Yeah.
have the tank on.
Yeah.
But I was smart. I took enough along with me. You know, I
Wow.
smart. And
Did you ever have anxiety about running out or getting in a situation, in a pinch, or were
well,
you,
sure.
I mean, we all learn to manage. We all have these moments where, you know, life happens and situations occur, but how did you manage that out? And I know that's your normal environment, but I just kind of like to hear how you manage some of that anxiety of.
Well, you know, the thing is to think ahead, because crossing the Indian Ocean, where the only islands you stop at are third world, and you're lucky to get fresh food,
Yeah.
or water or
Yeah.
fuel. I really had to think ahead, because the next stop was South Africa. And
Yeah.
that, you know, that's 5, 6, 7,000 miles with, of course, a lot of stops in between. So we didn't go straight through. We
Mhm.
weren't there to miss all these fabulous places. So I just filled up the boat with plastic bags full of stuff. Of course, I emptied them about all the cartons and stuff like that. And after a while, Austin, I was on that every 2 weeks, which is incredible. I
Wow.
still am now. Sometimes it goes even longer, you know.
Wow.
Um,
What do you use? What appliance or do you use right now?
Contact Durahesive.
Okay.
Contact Durahesive. And I have to use the, they call it pediatric or children's bag, because I'm so short. So I have to have the short bag, not the long bag.
Yeah.
My lack of height, you know.
It'd go down to your knees.
Yeah, it would. It wouldn't look good. It just wouldn't do. So that was kind of special, because a lot of the suppliers didn't have that.
Yeah.
You know, but I got it. And I, you know, like I say, my parents and my sisters were wonderful. They would ship it to me, and it would be waiting for me. I didn't
Yeah.
wait till I got to these places, because you can always have things shipped to international post restant, like Durban, South Africa, post restant, which is the post office, and they'll keep it for 90 days. So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
you know, that sort of thing. So, and I'm a ham radio enthusiast, KB4 Alpha Romeo
Yeah.
Golf. So I could tell my parents when I needed it on the ham radio. I didn't have to write an aerogram. Back in those days, there was no internet,
Yeah.
zero internet. So I used my ham radio to tell them where our next port of call was, that I thought that maybe we would be within 90 days,
Yeah.
and to ship it to that place. In the ham radio, you're not supposed to do business on a ham radio frequency. So we called it eggs in a basket. And my Easter eggs, you know, to this address, and, you know, the
That's funny.
So, well, it would be the Jacobs Archipelago. There was no post office there. Things like that. So you had to use your ingenuity,
Sure.
a little bit. And a couple of times I had trouble with customs, getting it out of customs, because they didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
But at least it wasn't prescription drugs, which you would have a big problem with.
Right. Exactly right.
But I can tell you, and I can tell everybody listening, I never had a shortage. Never.
Wow.
And what I'd like to tell people is how I handled changing my bag on this tiny boat. And just think of being in an airplane when you've got turbulence.
Yeah.
And that turbulence never leaves on a
No
sail
bueno. Yeah, it's terrible.
ever. So that boat is always, and you're hanging on to everything. And sometimes we were at sea for 27 days with 4 people living on a 39-foot sloop. It gets really tight.
Yeah.
So when I did have to change, and I had my accidents every so often. If I bump into something by mistake, or I didn't hang on properly, and everybody remembers the time standing in line at the bank when you've had a leak or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, on the boat that would happen occasionally, and my kids would get hysterical laughing. And as a matter of fact, my kids grew up saying, if we were walking around someplace in town, Mom, you got to go to the bathroom. Or Mom, you got to empty your baggie. They noticed the bulge there, and they didn't want me to have any problems. I mean, it became kind of a family joke that they were looking at me. Me, I didn't even think about it, but they were looking at me and wanted me to do something quickly. So I never had a problem with that. But I want to tell them what I did do, because the biggest problem, when you're changing, as you all probably know or have known at some time, is cleaning. Once you take the wafer off, and cleaning the area and then drying it carefully before you put the next wafer on.
Yes.
Of course, I would go to the head. That's what a bathroom is called on a small boat, the head. I'd sit on that pumping toilet, but I bought, the squeezed ketchup bottles you see at McDonald's, the red ones, yellow ones for mustard and ketchup.
Yeah.
Well, I had that. I bought one of those, and I filled it up with warm water. Now, to fill up with warm water, I had to boil a kettle on my kerosene stove. So I would boil the kettle, fill it up with half cold, half hot water. So I'd have this little container of less than half a pint of warm water.
Yeah.
And I'd sit on the toilet, and I'd just spray myself with that. Then I had a fan, and I would just fan myself till it dried. Well, I tap it with toilet paper. But don't forget, we had to conserve toilet paper too.
Yeah.
So I didn't use a lot. I did not use a lot of toilet paper, because if you run out of toilet paper, that's a disaster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That is
exactly right.
Toilet paper in the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
I've been in a stall at a pro football game, and I ran, and they didn't have any toilet paper in the stall I went. There just wasn't enough for the situation. I was changing the whole thing, and I had to sit there until I thought no one was in that bathroom to walk out around and grab it, covering up my stoma. Oh my goodness.
Well, I'll tell you what, I had occasions like that too, but only on land, and sometimes, especially in a bathroom stall, a public bathroom stall.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What I did was I had a little cosmetic bag, just a small cosmetic bag that was maybe 8 inches by 8 inches, with this top. And I always carried that in my, a yachty always has a canvas bag on their shoulder to carry groceries or boat parts or something back to their boat, because you always walk, you don't have a car.
Right.
So I'd always carry that little thing, and it had that ketchup squirt bottle. It had 3 wafers, 3 bags, extra clips, an extra pair of underwear.
Yeah.
And a little thing of Kleenex.
Yeah.
The little things of Kleenex.
Right.
I also kept Band-Aids in it and stuff like that in case my kids got a cut or something. So I always went around, and it was a really pretty little bag that I bought in Bermuda with little Bermuda flowers all over it. So it was a cosmetic bag.
Yeah.
And To this day, I never leave home without it. However, I haven't used it in so long. But in those days, when in the early years, I carried it everywhere with me. And sometimes I was very glad I had it, especially the ladies that clean underwear, because, what do? You wash them out, and then you put these wet, thick things back on again.
Yeah.
And don't think that I never had an accident. We all have the accidents. I just don't want to remember them.
Right. And we get over them. We deal with them.
I handled it. I sometimes got back to my airplane seat with soaking wet, pants, but dry underpants. You know what I mean? I can remember flying someplace over the Atlantic Ocean and had an accident in that bathroom in the airplane. And I want to tell you something. My small boat bathroom was so much more comfortable and easier to use than that airplane one. And I had to change all my clothes, my shirt, my pants, everything. And I had to clean it in that little sink, that you have to push down once to get a drop of water.
Right.
And then I had to wring them out. And of course, I kept hearing people knocking on the door. And then, of course, go back to my seat in my wet shirt, my wet pants, and my underwear that had certainly become wet after I put on the wet underpants. I mean, long pants. But I mean, you gotta laugh about it.
Right.
Because if you didn't laugh, we'd all go insane.
That's exactly right.
If we didn't laugh, we'd all go insane. And
that's
now,
exactly right.
I don't think anybody who knows me, unless very well, knows I even have an ostomy, because it doesn't affect my life.
Right.
I don't tell people. Why would I go up and say, "How do you do? I'm Pam Wall. I have an ostomy."
That's right.
I don't do that. If they notice something or something like that, I say something like, "Oh, I have a hollow leg, and I guess the leg is getting full," or something.
Yeah.
I make a joke out of it. I don't think it's necessary to tell anybody anything. However, everybody I'm close to knows about it. I mean, my close friends, our sailing buddies that are really good friends and stuff like that, they know about it. And I mean, it's just that it's a fact of life. It's like wearing a Band-Aid on your finger. And I have, I'm touching wood on my desk here. I am so grateful for that ostomy. And I don't want people to think it was easy in the beginning. It wasn't easy. It's just like having I had both my hips replaced, and then at different times. And then I had both my knees replaced at the same time. And you talk about recovery. 10 times worse than having 10 times worse. But if you don't have the right attitude and the knowledge that what you've just done is going to make you better, and you whimper to yourself, "Oh, what do I do to deserve this?" You're never going to get over it.
Yeah, that's exactly
and you've
right.
always got to strive to make it easier for yourself. Figure out these new things. And now it's been 20 years, because that happened back in 1989 when we flew home from New Zealand.
Your ostomy surgery?
Yeah. So what is that, 30 years?
Yeah. 31. 31. Wow.
Now, it saved my life. I mean, I get checked for cancer every 5 years, a CEA test.
Yeah.
Touch wood, nothing. So what we did was, because of my husband, Andy, we reacted in time. And, some people don't react in time because they don't want an ostomy.
Right. You just put it off. You almost forget you even have problems, and you get on down the road because you don't want to even have to deal with that thought.
Right. I mean, I wasn't that bad. I struggled sailing across the oceans till we got to New Zealand. It did get worse in New Zealand, but it wasn't something that I couldn't live with.
Yeah.
But Andy said,
that's right.
So you've got to be smart about it too.
Yeah, it took my folks, and I mean, I put it off until I had to get mine, and if it wasn't for my folks,
because they're afraid of it, or it's unknown to them, or it's almost like being paralyzed, but a different way. Do you know what I mean? But wow, when you think what it does for you.
Yep. I was so proud and I was so vain, Pam, that I couldn't see my reality of living with that. It was too hard mentally for me to put myself there. There was too much shame that I put on myself, and until I was forced to do
You
it.
weren't married yet, were you?
Nope, I was single.
See, I was fortunate. I had a man who loved me desperately,
Yeah.
wanted me to be healthy, wanted me to continue our life as we loved it. And so if anybody's listening who's worried about sexual,
Yeah.
encounters with an ostomy, didn't change a thing.
Yeah. Right.
All I would do is make sure it was totally empty before we would.
That's right. That's
And
right.
you know what? He didn't notice it. I didn't notice it.
Yeah.
And believe me, things didn't change. They only got better because I felt better.
Yeah. When I was looking for, in my dating life, I was always so insecure, and having the ostomy humbled me so much. It was so necessary that then I started looking for a spouse. I started looking for someone I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And sure enough, once my standards raised, once I began to accept myself and be comfortable with me, I found someone who, it wasn't like I was out there trying. I was trying, but I didn't care if I was single or if I met somebody, because I had a peace of mind with where I was at. And that's when I met my wife, who it never even came up. She never even thought about it. It was never even an issue. She just knew I was sick with Crohn's and colitis, and that was it. And she knew I had an ostomy, but that's just part of me being sick, and I deal with it and I handle it, and we get on down the road as a team.
Well, if someone doesn't love you enough to understand that this doesn't make a bit of difference, really.
Yeah.
And you have had kids, and that it's not going to affect your sexual life, your enjoyment of sexual life.
Right.
It's not the right person.
That's exactly right.
So that could have been your criteria.
Yeah, exactly.
I had a totally different situation. So I think if I could help any young person understand that, and they're listening to this podcast,
Yeah.
if what I'm saying and you're saying right now helps them, I tell you what, then you and I are a success, even if it's just one person.
That's right. I'd tell you that I'm a much gentler. I'm just a much gentler person with I have become humbled from what I've gone through, and as a husband, back when we were dating, as a boyfriend, I still with rough edges, but I'm a much gentler person, having to deal with what I've got.
And not only that, but you have self-pride.
Yeah.
And, before that, it's
so
very
important.
possibly, ooh, there's something wrong with me. I got to tell you about it before I can kiss you.
That's right.
That's ridiculous. I mean, so, and you know what? You don't want to be with someone who doesn't understand. And
no, you don't.
Care one bit. You know what I mean? So, and supports you.
Yeah.
And supports you. But
you have to have those two things. It's so important.
Yeah. And you know what? Life is beautiful.
Life is short to put up with that crap.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And you know what else? You don't want to be stuck with the wrong person.
No.
Andy used to say to me, we have so many friends who live their lives in quiet desperation, not because of physical problems, but because they weren't matched up right. And actually having the ostomy and having someone who understands and doesn't care and wants to be with you physically, sexually, however, actually makes the relationship something much more, I think, long-lasting.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I immediately know I am not, the world can judge me however they want. My mind can play whatever games it wants on me when I'm feeling down or I'm in a little rut. But knowing my wife, who is one, after we got married, we became one, and my counterpart is that much of a foundational pillar for who I am. it's hard for me to fall with her constantly holding me, knowing she's there as a backbone and constantly understands. There's nothing better than having that support.
Yeah, and even my kids, I don't know, maybe you're the same with your kids. My kids, you know, it was just, you know,
Right? Yeah, that's how mine are.
you know, and it's like having a handicapped person and they don't even see the handicap.
Yeah.
But there is
Yeah.
no handicap. That's
You know,
just,
you want to hear a funny story. So, and it is like this with kids, as you can attest, that when I had my ostomy and I was just dating, I was so broken by, you know, you share the information, you're dating, trying to find a spouse. And for me, it was always, God, I had to let somebody else into this broken world of mine. And now I got to move aside and start over with someone new. And I remember just thinking to myself, because I had a dog at the time after my ostomy surgery, I raised a lab. And I remember just thinking, I want someone who looks at me like my dog looks at me when I pass gas. It doesn't even bother him. He doesn't even think about it. It doesn't even cross his mind. He keeps sleeping. He comes and runs over and loves me. And I was just thinking, I want someone like that. And my children, that's exactly
great.
what they are, is they don't care. And when I don't feel well, they know it. And when I'm dealing with that, they know it's just a part of what I'm dealing with, no different than anything else we're all working on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And you know, when I used to have my very few accidents in public, you know, my kids would rally around and start laughing and saying, you know, come on, Mom, we'll take care of you. I'll go find a towel or something. You know, I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
they were so much a part of the family unit, you
yeah,
know, as and not caring what other people thought or anything, you know. The only
yeah.
thing my kids were kind of upset about when we came home from sailing around the world was because the school that my daughter went to is, I mean, this house that I bought back in 1968 was very inexpensive. And because it's waterfront now, it's very she to live here. That's the only original house left on the street, you know.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of a middle upper class school. And she said, you're the only one who doesn't wear a skirt and high heels. And I said, well,
Yeah.
Sam, when have I ever worn a skirt and high heels?
Yeah.
Her name was Samantha, we called her Sammy. And so she goes, I said, did you ever wear high heels in a skirt on the boat? You know, and she's, no. So,
That's so
and I
funny.
thought that was such a funny thing to compare us to.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, anyway.
So real quick, I want you to tell very quickly about your grandfather, a little bit of your experience with him. And I love your little story about him disappearing for about an hour. So just share that if you would. And
When I was a little girl growing up, we were a very close-knit family. And my mother's father, who lived in downtown Chicago, and we lived in Highland Park, which is a suburb just north of there, would have me and my two sisters overnight once a week, you know, on a weekend. And we'd watch the Friday night fights with my grandfather. And we always knew that sometimes when we were there, he'd excuse himself and close himself up in the bathroom. But we didn't know why. We thought maybe he was bathing or something like that. But that was, you know, Grandpa. And he was a surgeon. He was, in those days, can you imagine? He was a surgeon that went door to door.
Wow.
And he was originally paid in chickens and eggs and corn on the cob and stuff like that. Because he came from a little tiny town in Wisconsin where he was a doctor there. But then they moved to Chicago. And because my grandmother went to the University of Chicago. She was a professor there. Not only did she graduate there, but she became a PhD and was teaching there. Anyway, he was a surgeon, and he would go down to Miami Beach. This is, you know, when Miami Beach was not discovered yet. And they would take their grandchildren with them on the train. We'd go on the train because there were no planes. You know?
Yeah.
And we'd spend about a month with them because my father started his own business and my mother was his secretary. And it was easier for her not to have to work with three little girls after work. And my So my grandparents took the burden off of that, just for a couple of weeks in the winter time. And he used to, we always stayed at this hotel right on the beach. And we always saw, I mean, we were very young, but he would go out into the surf, way out, and tell us to stay on the shore, And he'd be out there facing the ocean, not the beach, for maybe an hour at a time. And we thought it was just, he just loved being out there by himself, sort of chest high in the water. And then he would come back in. And as we grew up and we found out that he was one of the first people in the United States of America to have an ostomy, and to have an ostomy, he had to go to Austria.
To go get the surgery done?
Yes. So this is before my mother was, that's right, my mother grew up speaking German because of living in Austria. So they went to Austria, my mom and her mother and father, because she was the only one in the family, the only daughter, went to Austria, where my grandfather had one of the first ostomies. And because he was a surgeon, he wanted to invent, what he had was a bag that was just belted onto him.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I didn't know that then. And what he would do when he went out in the water, because his skin would get sore, because, it didn't adhere to keep, the enzymes away that bad.
Yeah.
He would take his pants off, take that bag or that belt off that had the bag, and just let the salt water
work on the skin. Yeah.
Work on the skin. And that's why they went down to Miami so much, because they would go 2 or 3 times a year. Of course, we didn't realize that. And he was instrumental in trying to design something much more appropriate, mostly for your skin.
Yeah.
In those days, they didn't have adhesives or anything. So that was, that's why I'm wondering if this isn't hereditary. And my children never got it. My sister's children never got it. But my grandfather had this situation, and my mother was a very sickly child. She never had to have surgery. She had dozens of surgeries, but none of them were ostomies. She had dozens of surgeries as she was a little girl. But she grew up to be a beautiful young woman. She also went to the University of Chicago, and she married my dad, who went to the University of Chicago. And she was over it by the time she was in college. But as a young child, she had many, many surgeries. And but she was okay. But that's because her father did the surgery on her, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and didn't do anything he didn't have to. His only daughter, And then, of course, I was the first one in my family of 3 girls to get sick. And I got sick, I guess I was around 11 or 12. And of course, nobody at that time wanted to believe what it was. We had just come back from skiing in Colorado, and they thought I had Rocky Mountain spotted fever. But it was kind of obvious I didn't. And so I was in.
Throw anything at you. She has this.
Oh yeah. I mean, I was in and out of hospitals. I went to the Evanston Hospital. I went to the Highland Park Hospital where we lived. I went to the Evanston Hospital. I went to the University of Chicago Clinics Hospital. This is over a period of, say, 5 or 6 years. I went to Mayo Clinic. I went to all those places. And an ostomy was never an option then. Maybe it was too new. I don't know. But it was never an option. And I was on drugs like a sulfidine and stuff like that. I had to eat a lot of yogurt. I don't know why, but I hated yogurt. But
I was the same. Yeah.
I don't know, so I don't know what they were trying to do, but I had the best doctors, but never mentioned an ostomy. So when I grew up and I went to college, I still hadn't had my period.
Did you think that was linked at all, or were you just
sure, they all thought it was,
Okay.
the trauma of the illnesses and the medications that I was taking. Oh, and I was on a lot of steroids.
Did your sisters, I'm sure you and your sisters and your mom may have talked about this, but is that genetic? Did you guys all start late? Did you find that out?
We didn't think it was until my other 2 sisters got it.
Wow, okay.
I was the first. But so I was the first. But the funny thing was, I wasn't the first to have the ostomy because I was off sailing around the world. My sisters grew into young women and they each had to have an ostomy.
Wow.
And so they also gave me a lot of comfort and help when I had mine, because I saw
Sure,
how
yeah.
it instantly cured them. And of course, they knew how to handle. By that time, my sister Wendy was an expert with, because she has been the president of Broward Ostomy Association, BOA, for probably 15 years.
Wow.
And she goes to all the big AOSS meetings, you know,
Uh-huh.
and stuff like that. So she's the editor of the magazine and everything. So she was very helpful for me, you know, very helpful for me. She was the one who got me the best nurse, you know, to help me get through the beginning week
Wow.
and stuff like
That's
that.
huge.
Yeah, yeah. And so my other sister probably wouldn't want me to tell you that she had one, so I'm not going to mention her name, but
Yeah.
she's very private about it, very private, but she's fine too.
Yeah.
Actually, she had 2 kids, 3 kids, because she had twins once with an ostomy, and
Yeah.
she had natural birth,
Normal birth.
normal
Wow.
birth with twins.
Oh, wow.
And then after that, she had a little girl. She had 2 boys, and then she had a little girl. So that's another thing that if women are interested in,
Yeah.
she had no problem with that, you know. So she wanted to kill her gynecologist because she wanted to have a C-section with the twins. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, he said any surgery is a problem. So if you can do them normally, we're going to do them normally. And of course, it wasn't easy. She's my height. She's my
Yeah.
size.
Yeah.
I can just imagine what a nightmare it was, but it was okay. But anyway, so that's when the University of Chicago clinics started getting interested in us. And we had to take, we did a lot of surveys for them. I mean, we never went to see them because we all lived down here, but they would send us these surveys of our genetics and
Sure.
my mom's problem, my grandfather's problem. We didn't know anything beyond my grandfather, so we couldn't trace it further. But they said, you know, it's very possible that this is genetic, but I don't know what they ever came up with. I never was interested, except that I should have been because of my kids. But touch wood so far. I mean, my daughter died from cancer, but it wasn't intestinal cancer.
Uh-huh.
My son, who's 40 years old, hasn't had any.
He's healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all I'm hoping is that they had their father's genes, which they did because they're normal size, they're normal height.
Yeah.
I was afraid both of my kids would be midgets like me, but
They're both tall.
Jamie's 6'3" like his dad, and Samantha was, 5'8" or 9" or something. So
Yeah.
I didn't have to. So I always hoped that they had his genes, you know.
So how has, since going through and dealing with not just your health problems, but also some of the tragedy, the loss, and also managing your health throughout, how have you noticed your growth in a positive way in learning to grow and accept these struggles that show up in each of our lives? How have you noticed in Pam's world how you've become a better person because of them?
Well, first of all, as I was recovering and then living a full life after the ostomy, very full life. And, you know, sometimes you have dreams like, this is too good to be true.
Yeah.
Because it was.
Yeah.
I mean, and my husband and I were insulating the inside of the same sailboat to sail up to the Arctic. We wanted to go up to Svalbard and places like that. And he suddenly died, just like that.
Yeah. Wow.
He was reading a book in a chair, and he said, I feel funny, and his head fell back and he died. And unfortunately, we were in the boondocks of North Carolina, I mean, in the mountains. And when they finally got him someplace to a hospital, they asked if I wanted an autopsy, and I was totally in shock. And I said, "Don't touch him. I want him cremated, and I want to put his ashes in the Gulf Stream." So I will never know why he died, but it was so quick. And my doctors told me that if it had been a heart attack, he would have been holding his heart. But he actually went like this, "Pammy, I feel funny." He said it had to be something like an aneurysm or something like that, because he was the strongest, healthiest man I've ever met. And he was 63.
Wow.
And that, if I hadn't had my 2 children to support me, Samantha, who was living in Maine, and my son Jamie, who was at the Rhode Island School of Design, both came and stayed with me before they went back to their normal lives. And the only thing that I can suggest to people is, when you do have tragedy in your life, the most wonderful support you can have is from your family. And that what you've got to do is remember that if you let yourself go down, you're leaving the joy of living behind, and you can never get it back unless you realize that you're lucky to be alive, you're lucky to be healthy, you're lucky for the little things you have, you know, and you have got to make the most, to me, the most out of what you've got while you're on this planet. And the biggest inspiration I had when Andy died was that he's up there saying to me, "You better keep going, kid. Because if you don't, I am going to be really disappointed in you.
Yeah.
I'm watching you. I'm sailing up here in the clouds. But you better be the way you've always been, because otherwise I'm disappointed in you." Now, when my daughter got cancer, it was totally different, because I had to live through 4 years of chemo and radiation hell with her.
Yeah.
And
Which is terrible.
She had a little baby. Actually, it was 3 years. And she had a little baby, and thank God her father never saw her suffer the way she suffered. And I still have nightmares about that. So she's up there with her dad. And now she's comfortable after 3 torturous years.
Yeah.
Went through three series of chemo and radiation, and I think that's what killed her. I mean, the cancer would have killed her, but
yeah.
Anyway.
That radiation and the chemo is brutal. My sister, I mean, when she was in high school, went through serious cancer treatment, and it's so hard on the human person, physical and emotional. It's so hard. Yep, I understand. But not
anyway, I have nightmares about that, and I actually had to go to a therapist about that, because I've lost the love of my life, and then I've lost my beautiful daughter, who was my best friend. And my son is just desolate, because they were so close from living aboard that boat together for so long. And you know what she said to me? She said, "Pam, let off steam, cry here, get hysterical here. That's an open book. But when you get home, you close that book and you put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
And if the book ever flops open by mistake, you close the book and put it on your shelf. And keep going, kid.
Yeah.
Because if you're not happy and you're not doing positive things in your life and you're feeling sorry for yourself, you're going to make it so much worse for you."
Yeah, you're only going to keep feeling sorry for yourself. Yep.
You're going to make it worse and worse, and people won't like you. They won't want to be with you. Your whole life is going to change for the worst. And then you're going to be, you know, at that point where you can't come back. So you got to stop it.
Yeah.
You got to stop it as soon as you realize what's happening.
Right.
And so that's what I'm doing. And, you know, I don't feel sorry for myself, but what I do feel is grateful for what I had.
Yeah.
And my son is still my best friend. We do everything together when we can. And life is beautiful. Look where I live.
Right. That's exactly right.
And this COVID thing is driving me crazy, because I'm a very social person. I love being with other people, and I love helping other people. I'm a consultant now, and I love helping other people. And I can't, except virtually, like we are today, which is fine. but
for stuff like this, right? But yeah.
yeah. Anyway, I can't wait for COVID to be over, and I hope it's sooner more than later. But at least we have this. We never had this before.
Yeah.
Can you
Exactly
imagine?
right. That's exactly right.
You
No,
and I
this is
never
it.
would
This
have
is
met.
awesome.
Yeah, you and I never would have met except for social
Right.
media and the screen. And of
Right.
course, you're lucky I know what to do to turn it on because I'm not in that generation, you know.
Yeah.
Everybody now who sales has all these electronic pieces of equipment. You know, we never had that.
Yeah.
We had to navigate by the stars and the sun and the moon.
All reliable.
We had to go outside and go like this if we wanted a
Yeah.
weather report. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The only thing I did have, which was wonderful, was the communication with my family, the ham radio, which was fantastic. So I could contact my parents no matter where I was in the world on that ham radio. It's a magic box as far as I'm concerned. But today, you just have satellite phones, you know.
Yeah. Well, you just finished up talking about how marching on, getting over, you know, putting the book back on the shelf. How many times have you and I mean, we all do this, but even as we're going, we see ourselves kind of going into that place and the book falls off the shelf. How many times did I not want to leave my house to go see my friends that asked me to come over? Or how many times did I want to cancel a Zoom meeting like this? Because I didn't want to talk, but I did it anyway. And that conversation actually pulled me right out of the hole that I was falling into. Just saying yes to those opportunities and trying to keep yourself above water. That's what putting the book on the shelf is it's learning that it's fallen and that you're not going to go and open it up and let yourself go to that dark place. Just put it up and stomp on.
Absolutely. And, you know, if you don't do that, you're just cheating yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I totally agree with that. And as I always say to people, the anxiety gets softer and softer, and all of a sudden it disappears. Now I can say that about my ostomy, and I can actually say that about losing Andy. I'm still a little, you know, like this about Samantha because it was more recent and it lasted so long. And to have a mother see a child suffer is probably one of the worst things in the whole world. Yeah. So, but you're absolutely right. If you can't just let yourself get into it, but get out of it quick, you know, you're just cheating yourself.
And we lose time. And that's the other thing is that life is so short that, I mean, I look back, I've had my ostomy for only 15 years now. And I remember the day I got it like it was yesterday, and I wasted, I don't know how many months of my life, Pam, but I wasted a lot feeling sorry for myself, not doing things I ought. I mean, how long ago could I have started this podcast if I didn't get a 7-year, you know, hesitation start because my confidence was so low? I mean, it's amazing how much time we can lose when we let ourselves fall into that spiral.
And do you ever think of yourself as having an ostomy?
I don't. Never.
It just doesn't occur to me. Why would I?
Right.
You know.
That's exactly right.
It's like having a pimple on your face or something. You know, I mean, you can't, or not a pimple, but a mole that you can't get rid of. Who cares?
Yeah. Like I've never identified myself by any one quality about myself. I never have. That's why I don't understand a lot of what's going on in our world today, because we're human beings and we're missing that. But that's exactly where this is. You know, it's human beings connecting, and I don't see myself as a person with I have Crohn's, I have ulcerative colitis, I have an ostomy, and lots of stories to go with them. But as soon as you and I finish this podcast, Pam, we're going right back to our life, and we won't talk about it until who knows when it'll come up next.
Exactly. I'm just looking something up because I think they've been canceled. But if I might put in a plug.
Yeah, dude.
I think it's called the American Ostomy Association of America.
the United Ostomy Association of America,
Yeah,
UOAA.
yeah, UOAA.
Uh-huh.
The only reason I ever went to that or even knew about it was because my sister Wendy goes to it every single year.
Yeah.
And she invited me to be the guest speaker about 3 years ago. And I went to that. And I was only going to stay for my talk and then I was going to leave. And I met an auditorium room filled with frightened, scared people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I was talking, I could see the interest, the joy, the laughter, because I try to be light and humorous as well. And I could see how these people came there in fear, or not maybe in fear, but worried. Okay.
Yeah.
And when I showed them my little, purse that I can, not my little cosmetic bag that I take around with me, and my little ketchup thing and stuff like that. And then we had a Q&A afterwards, and it lasted for almost an hour.
Oh,
and,
awesome.
I thought to myself, this is what I love doing. I love helping other people.
Yeah.
And I mean, these were people of all ages, from young kids to senior citizens. And it was such a wonderful, I think it was 3 days, 2 days, 3 days. And I ended up staying and going to a lot of the breakout rooms. They had, breakout rooms.
Yeah.
And met so many wonderful people. And the main raison d'etre for that meeting is to encourage other people who have what you and I had in the beginning, which is perfectly normal.
Yeah.
And to realize that their life isn't over.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Some of us, we take us a long time. Others, we can get it right away. Where I have a guy in my ostomy support group, Pam, that, I mean, since the day of his surgery, he's been thankful. And he's just like, he was married for many, many years. His kids are older. It's just happening at that point in his life. He's got great help and he loves it. And he didn't have that hiccup. And then there's the whole other end of the spectrum. But the majority are really struggling. Like you said, auditoriums, like my listeners, the reason I even started this was just so that people could hear others sharing about living their life, overcoming that BS and stomping forward and not missing out.
Yeah, I want you to tell people my email address is pam@pamwall.com. It's really easy to remember. If anyone wants to just chit chat, talk, ask a question or anything like that.
Yeah. I
love helping people, and I'm here to help. And if and when the AOSS has their next meet, or
UOAA.
Yeah, UOAA has another meeting, I highly encourage people to go to it. It's always in a hotel, so you're right there. You don't have to go out of the hotel, a big conference room hotel. And the people who run it are so wonderful, so caring. Of course, they all have ostomies.
Yeah. And
they're from all walks of life. And they want to help too. So you have this group of people who want to help. The only reason they have it is for help. They also have a big auditorium that they fill with vendors.
Yeah.
So you go to different vendors for different really cool products that you don't even know exist for ostomates. I mean, I saw some really cool ones, especially for athletic people.
Yeah.
Tennis players, scuba divers, football players, stuff like that. So they had products that you never knew existed if you didn't go to that conference.
That's awesome.
And friendly, nice, good food, which I love.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed with it. So impressed.
Well, good. So check out UOAA.com and look up their annual convention, which I don't know when that is either. I think the last one was in June. So I don't know when, and that was probably canceled. So I don't know when it was or when the next one's going to be. So.
But a lot of these conferences that I normally go to for boat shows are being done virtually now.
Yeah.
They might even have a virtual one. I don't know.
Yeah.
I love
Well, I
working
have,
because I can be a presenter, from my living room. Although I miss the airplane flight and the hotel rooms
yeah,
and
yeah.
the mingling with the people. I really do miss that. But it's kind of much more convenient for me than having to travel a lot.
Do you think you'll go to the next in-person one if it's in 2021 or
I
2022?
probably will. If Wendy, my sister, goes, we'll go together again.
Okay.
I was very
'Cause
impressed.
I
I
want
would
to try
love
and go.
to have a class.
I'd love to see you and just say hi if you're there.
Yeah, well, I'd love to be one of the instructors
That would be cool.
in the
Yeah.
class. And I would call my class, "You Can Do It."
Yeah.
Or if I can do it, you can do it, or something like that. Because I want to give people encouragement.
Yeah.
So many of them are very, very technical, which is great.
If your sister has any pull, tell her I'll help out with one of those also.
Okay, I'll tell her that.
Yeah, do.
Yeah. Well, she's very much, a part of it, but I don't know when it's going to be again.
Yeah, me neither.
So look up a Broward Ostomy Association,
Okay.
and her name is Wendy Leader, but it's spelled Lueder.
Well,
You'll see. I don't know if your Ostomy Association has a book. I mean, not a book, but a little news
Yeah.
article that comes out.
yeah, what are they called? A newsletter.
Yeah, newsletter. Yeah.
Well, Pam, thank you so much for coming on. This was wonderful. I appreciate you sharing. What's that? Oh, yeah, you're welcome.
How did you find me?
Remember through one of my ostomy nurses here just sent me a text message and said I was just on a conference call, or this might have been within the last year or something, and it might have been your sister, but I'm almost positive it was you, because your sister's name never came up until you told me who she was, but told me to look you up because she had not only heard, she had just found out you had an ostomy, but knew you from just some of the sailing stuff you had done. Just, it's total random connection, but she sent me a text message and said, look this gal up. You'll love her story. She'd probably be open to come on and see if you guys can't get together. So that's what I did.
I thought you might have read it in the Phoenix, because they did write an article about it in the Phoenix.
And that's exactly right. But this was something else. She didn't reference the Phoenix. I had already read your article from the Phoenix, and that just followed up with my memory of who you were and a little bit more of your backstory, which is why I ended up reaching out to you anyways. So,
well, if anybody has the dream, funny enough, I always had the dream of finding the man of my dreams and sailing around the world with my family. If anybody ever has that dream, if they go to pamwall.com, that is my website. And you don't have to go to too much of the boating stuff, but if you go to the photo gallery,
yeah,
you'll get to know me even more, because there's dozens of pictures that we put in there.
That's cool.
Yeah, and the reason I put the pictures in was to get people excited about what I do in my life, which is sail.
Yeah.
And I want other people to get excited. There's nothing like a picture.
Yeah.
1,000 words. What do they say? Picture's worth 1,000 words.
And they are. Yeah.
So,
well, thanks again.
There's one picture there, and I'll share this with you, okay?
Yeah.
One picture there of our boat is in the background, and me and the two little kids are making sand castles in this pile of sand with the boat anchored right behind us. So you'll see the two kids and me, and I'm in a bikini, and you can see the bulge in my stomach. That was when we were in a group of islands in the South Pacific before we got to New Zealand. And if you look carefully, it kind of looks like I'm pregnant.
Yeah.
That's why I stopped wearing the bikini. But you can see this bulge that was appearing there.
Yeah.
Before we got to New Zealand.
Wow.
But I'm only going to tell you guys that. I don't tell the sailors that.
Yeah. Check out this picture. Look at my stomach.
But it's all funny, because that's the only thing I see and think, oh, I should have worn another bathing suit for that picture.
Yeah.
In those days, you didn't have cameras. We only had the camera out occasionally, because
right.
It had to be waterproof and all that kind of stuff.
They weren't everywhere like they are today.
No, they are. And I had to send the film back to the States from wherever we were that had a post office, and then wait months to get the pictures back. And One funny story, I sent 12 rolls of film with 36 pictures each when we got to Tahiti.
Uh-huh.
And my mother decided to come and visit us. Now, my mother was half my age now, and I thought she was too old to fly all the way to Tahiti from Fort Lauderdale. But she came, and in those days, you could fly with hazardous material and stuff. So we asked her to bring a gallon can of anti-fouling with her.
What's that?
That's the bottom paint you use on your boat so it doesn't get barnacles on it.
Okay.
It's highly poisonous.
Okay.
So she did that for us, but she also brought us all the photographs. And she brought she bought Christmas presents for the kids, all in about 3 duffel bags. Well, when she got off the plane in Papeete and her red duffel bag came through, you could smell it before it came through.
Oh, no.
And I guess because the cabin wasn't pressurized or something, and nobody had clipped the lids in those days. She had taped the lids, but obviously. And this gallon of anti-fouling, red anti-fouling, had coated everything in that bag. So it was all the Christmas presents, all the photographs, all my husband's size 15 shoes that she brought for him that are so hard to get. And we had to throw everything away.
Oh no, what a mess.
I know. And it was like,
See, if we can clean up our ostomy messes, you couldn't clean that one up. Well, Pam, thank you very much for sharing your stories and taking some time this morning. I really appreciate it. I know our listeners do. If everybody could go to Pam at pamwall.com. If you guys want to reach out to her, do it. Hit subscribe, follow us, and like us on Instagram and Facebook. And as always, share your story and share this podcast with those in your life that are dealing with this stuff. It's so important that we hear about other people and what they're going through and how they're dealing with it, because that's what helps us battle out. So thanks, Pam, again. I appreciate it.